Welcome back once again to Bible Basics for New Believers. My name is Ray, and today we will be looking at the books from Exodus to Ruth. If you missed any of the previous videos, there are links above and in the description below so that you can get caught back up. We're starting in Exodus, and if you remember from our previous video, Joseph had brought the people of Israel into Egypt so that they might be protected. When we open Exodus, it's about 300 years later, and the people have grown significantly. And the Bible tells us there is a Pharaoh who rises up that does not know Joseph. That does not mean that he did not know Joseph, but that he did not have any significant relationship or obligation to Joseph's people. And because they had grown so significantly in numbers, Pharaoh was afraid they might join the enemies of Egypt in attacking them. So Pharaoh enslaves the Jews, and God raises up the man Moses to free the people of God and to bring them into the promised land. He does this by eventually bringing 10 plagues on the nation of Israel. And at the end of the 10 plagues, Pharaoh relents and lets God's people go. And as they are leaving Egypt, God parts the Red Sea so they can safely cross. In the meantime, Pharaoh has changed his mind and decides to chase after them. As the Egyptian army enters the Red Sea, God closes it back up, destroying the Egyptian army. Safely on the other side, God brings them to Mount Sinai, where he gives them the 10 Commandments and instructs them on how to build a tabernacle where they will worship God. Now in Leviticus, we are at the beginning of the second year from the Exodus. The people are still camped at Mount Sinai. God establishes a sacrificial system in which they are to worship him. He also establishes the priesthood, and the first high priest will be Aaron, Moses' brother. The book of Leviticus shows us that because God is holy, the people of God also must be holy. As we enter the book of Numbers, we see that God has brought his people out of slavery from Egypt, and now he is intending to bring them into the promised land. A census is taken of all the people. Then 12 spies are sent out to see indeed if it can be conquered. 10 spies come back with a bad report, and only Joshua and Caleb say that it is conquerable. Because the first generation will not obey God and enter into the promised land, he becomes angry with them. He causes them to wander in the desert for 40 years until they all die except for Joshua and Caleb. A second census is then taken, and these people will enter the promised land. We now come to the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses gives the law to the second generation before they are to enter the promised land. Joshua now becomes the leader of Israel, and Moses now dies. In the book of Joshua, Joshua conquers the promised land. Probably the most significant story we remember from Joshua is the fall of Jericho, where the people of Israel march around Jericho, shout, and the walls come falling down. At the end of Joshua, the land is divided among the 12 tribes, but the people failed to conquer the whole land as God had commanded. Now we come to the book of Judges. At the beginning of Judges, Joshua dies. And the nations that were left behind in the conquered land will now become a thorn in the side of Israel. And the book of Judges is actually 7 cycles, where first the people refuse to obey God. God uses these nations to punish them. They then repent and call out for God to deliver them. And God does send a deliverer, a judge, who is a local leader. The judge does rescue them, but they repeat the cycle 6 more times. Judges were just local leaders, and 2 of the most known would be Samson and Gideon. We finally come to the book of Ruth, and we told you before that Ruth fits in about the 10th chapter of Judges. Ruth was from Moab, which was a cursed nation. She married a Jew who had come down with his family because of a drought. And he dies and she becomes a widow. Her Jewish mother-in-law tells her she can return to her people. But Ruth says, I want to come to Israel and worship the true God. When she arrives in Israel, the mother-in-law arranges that she be married by the closest relative. This is known as the kinsman redeemer. Kinsman redeemer is significant in this, that Jesus had to be a close relative to us. He had to become a human man in order to redeem humankind. Ruth stands in contrast to Judges in that Ruth, being a woman from Moab and a Gentile, which is a non-Jew, is faithful to God more so than the people of God are in the book of Judges. Now that we have seen how God has brought the people into the promised land, in our next video we will see how God establishes a king for them. If you are enjoying these videos, please subscribe. And until then, God bless.